I woke up with a gasp and something ice cold hitting my face. Water. Cold water. An entire bucket of cold water was dumped on me as if I were trash in the street. My sheets were soaked, my hair stuck to my face, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. And there he was, my son, Robert, standing next to my bed, the empty bucket in his hands, and that expression on his face. That expression I knew so well. Impatience, irritation, as if I were a problem he needed to solve quickly. "Get up, Mum. It's already 7 o'clock in the morning," he yelled, dropping the plastic bucket onto the floor with a dull thud. "Jasmine is coming for breakfast in an hour. Where are the pancakes? Why are you still in bed?" I just lay there, sprawled among the wet sheets, looking at the ceiling of my own room. My room, in my own house. The house I had bought with my retirement money after working 35 years as a secretary, and my son had just thrown a bucket of cold water on me, as if I were a stray dog. "Mum, are you listening to me?" His voice went up another notch. "Jasmine will be here in an hour. I need you to make those special pancakes you always do. You know, the ones with the fluffy texture. And coffee. Good coffee, not that instant garbage you drink. And freshly squeezed orange juice. I also want you to make those scrambled eggs with cheese and mushrooms." I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. The water was still dripping from my hair onto the pillow. I felt the cold penetrating to my bones. And then I remembered. Today was October 15th, my birthday. I was turning 61 years old, and my son had just woken me up by throwing ice-cold water on me. "Did you hear me?" Robert snapped his fingers in front of my face. "Move it. I don't have all day. Jasmine is very particular about food, and I need everything to be perfect. Perfect. Understand? Not like the last time you burned the bacon." I sat up slowly. The water ran down my back, soaking my old nightgown. That cotton nightgown I'd had for 10 years because I never had the money to buy a new one. All my money went to maintaining this house, to paying for Robert's food, to buying that expensive clothing he wore to impress Jasmine. "Robert," my voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. "Today is my birthday." He stopped at my bedroom doorway. For a second, just a second, I thought maybe he had forgotten, that maybe he would apologize, that maybe he would hug me and say, "Happy birthday, Mum, forgive me." But then he turned around and looked at me with those cold eyes, the same eyes as his father. "So what?" he said. "Jasmine is coming in an hour. Your birthday can wait. Now get up and start cooking." And he left. Just like that. As if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just dumped ice-cold water on me. As if it weren't my birthday. As if I wasn't his mother, but his housekeeper. I stayed sitting on that wet bed, staring at the empty doorway where he had disappeared. My hands were shaking. I don't know if it was from the cold or the rage that was starting to grow inside me. A rage that had been there for years, dormant, waiting. Growing little by little with every insult, with every order, with every time he treated me as if I was worthless. I got up. My bare feet hit the cold floor. I walked to the dresser mirror and looked at myself. A woman of 61 years old with soaked hair stuck to her face. Deep dark circles under her eyes. Wrinkles that weren't there 5 years ago. Rough hands from all the washing, cleaning, cooking. For him. Always for him. From the hallway came his voice again. "Mum, are you up yet? Time is running." I clenched my fists. I closed my eyes. And I breathed. Once, twice, 3 times. I thought about Jasmine, my daughter-in-law, the perfect woman Robert had snagged. Tall, elegant, always with those coral-painted nails and that expensive perfume that left a scent throughout the house for hours. The woman who barely looked at me when she visited, who had never said thank you for a single meal I prepared. And today she was coming for breakfast, at 8 o'clock in the morning. A Tuesday. Since when did Jasmine have breakfast here? She always said my house was too small, too old, too humble for her standards. Something wasn't right. But I didn't have time to think. Robert yelled again from the kitchen, and I, as always, obeyed. I took off the wet nightgown and put on the only clean dress I had, an old grey one with an oil stain on the hem that I could never get out. I tied my still damp hair back in a ponytail and left my room. In the hallway, the water from the bucket had left a trail all the way to the kitchen, as if it were marking the path of my humiliation. And as I walked, following that trail, barefoot and shaking, something inside me began to wake up. Something that had been asleep for too long, but I still didn't know what it was. I still didn't understand that this bucket of cold water would be the last, that this birthday would be the day everything would change, forever. But let me tell you how I got here. How a woman of 61 years old ends up being woken up with cold water by her own son on her birthday. Because this didn't start today. This started a long time ago, maybe too long. It all began 3 years ago when Robert lost his job. Again. It was the fourth company that had fired him in 5 years. It was always the same. Problems with the boss, problems with co-workers, problems with the schedules. According to him, the whole world was against him. It was never his fault. Never. He arrived at my door on a rainy Tuesday with 2 suitcases and that look of a lost boy he always used when he needed something. "Mum, it'll only be for a few weeks," he told me. "Until I get another job. I just need a place to stay." The weeks turned into months. The months turned into years. And I, like an idiot, allowed it. Because he was my son. Because a mother always forgives. Because I thought this time would be different. That this time, he would change. In the beginning, it wasn't so bad. Robert looked for work. Or at least, that's what he said. He spent hours on his laptop on my living room couch. But the calls never came. The interviews never came. And little by little, his temporary room became his permanent room. My house became his house, and I became his maid. It started with small things. "Mum, could you wash this shirt for me? I have an important interview tomorrow." "Mum, could you iron my pants? You know I don't do it well." "Mum, could you make me breakfast? I woke up late and I don't have time." And I did it. Every time. Because he was my son. Because I wanted to help him. Because I thought if I supported him enough, he would return to being the sweet boy he once was. That boy who brought me flowers from the garden. That boy who hugged me and told me I was the best mum in the world. But that boy had died a long time ago. And in his place remained this 35-year-old man who treated me worse than a dish rag. Then came Jasmine. Oh, Jasmine. He met her on a dating app. She was a manager at an expensive clothing store at the mall. She had her own apartment, her own car, her own money. Everything Robert didn't have. And somehow, I don't know how, he managed to win her over. The first time he brought her home, I was excited. Maybe a good woman would change him. Maybe love would make him mature. Maybe he would finally move out and I would get my life back. I was wrong. Completely. Jasmine walked into my house with those high heels that made noise on my old hardwood floor. She looked around with that expression. You know the one. That barely disguised look of disappointment. As if my house was too small for her standards. As if my old furniture was a personal insult. "So this is where you live," she said. without even looking me in the eyes. How cozy, cozy, the word people use when they don't want to say poor. I made dinner that night, roast chicken with potatoes and a salad. Nothing fancy, but made with love. I put out my best tablecloth, the white one with embroidered yellow flowers my mother had given me before she passed away. I lit a candle. I wanted to make a good impression. Jasmine barely touched the food. She moved the chicken back and forth across the plate with her fork, making those subtle faces she thought I didn't notice. Robert looked at her with adoration, asking her every 5 minutes if she needed anything else. Water, salt, pepper, napkins, as if she were a queen and we were her servants. "Your mother cooks very homemade," Jasmine said, wiping her mouth with the napkin. "I normally eat more sophisticated, organic food, gluten-free, those kinds of things." Gluten-free. My roast chicken wasn't good enough because it had gluten. But the worst came after. When they went into the living room and I stayed behind doing the dishes, I overheard their conversation. I didn't want to hear. But the walls of my house are thin, and their voices weren't exactly whispers. "I can't believe you still live with your mother," Jasmine was saying. "Robert, you're 35 years old. It's a little pathetic, don't you think?" My heart stopped. I waited for his answer. I waited for him to defend me, to tell her that I had helped him when no one else would, that this was my house and he was my guest. "I know, love," Robert said, "but it's temporary. Besides, she needs the company. She's lonely. I'm doing her a favor by staying here." A favor. Living for free in my house, eating my food, using my electricity, my water, my Wi-Fi. It was a favor he was doing me. I swallowed. I kept washing the dishes, tears mixed with the soapy water, but I didn't allow myself to cry. Not yet. 6 months later, they got married. It was a small wedding. Jasmine said she didn't want anything ostentatious, but I knew the truth. She didn't want to spend money on a wedding when she could spend it on other things. Like that designer handbag that cost $800 and that Robert bought her with the money I had lent him to look for work. Money he never returned to me, of course. I thought that after the wedding they would move in together, that I would finally have my house back, my peace, my life. But no. Jasmine said her apartment was too small for 2 people, that they needed to save up for something bigger, that in the meantime, wouldn't it be nice to stay at my place? There was enough space, in my 2-bedroom house, where I slept in the small room that had been my sewing room because they needed the main bedroom, the room with the private bathroom, the room with the big closet, my room, the one I had decorated with so much love when I bought this house. And I, like an idiot, said yes. Because Robert looked at me with those eyes, because he told me, "It will only be a few months, Mum." Because Jasmine smiled for the first time and said, "You are so generous, Martha. How lucky Robert is to have a mother like you." Generous, that word they use to manipulate you, to make you feel that if you say no, you are selfish. A bad mother, a bad person. The months passed. 1, 2, 6, 1 year, and nothing changed. Except that every day I became more and more their unpaid housekeeper. I washed their clothes, I ironed Robert's shirts and Jasmine's expensive dresses, I cleaned their room, I changed their sheets. I cooked 3 meals a day because Jasmine was very particular about food and needed different menus every day. "Martha, I don't feel like chicken today," Jasmine would say from the couch, without looking up from her phone. "Could you make fish? But make it salmon, not tilapia. Tilapia is too common." Common. Like me. Like my house. Like my whole life. And the money. My goodness, the money. My retirement pension was $1,200 a month. Sounds like a lot, right? But when you pay the mortgage, the utilities, food for 3 people, Jasmine's whims, Robert's expenses, nothing is left. Absolutely nothing. I stopped buying clothes for myself. I stopped going to the beauty parlor. I stopped buying those little things that made me happy. Those magazines I liked to read on Sundays. That special coffee I drank on Saturday mornings. Those fresh flowers I put on the dining room table. Everything was gone. Everything disappeared. Because Robert needed gas for the car I had given him. Because Jasmine needed that new pair of shoes that cost $250. Because they needed. And I gave, until nothing was left of me. My neighbor Dorothy noticed it first. She lived next door, a 70-year-old woman with more life in her than I had. She was always in her garden, watering her plants, talking to the birds, smiling. One day she found me taking out the trash and looked at me with that worried expression. "Martha," she said softly, "are you okay? You look very thin and tired." I shrugged. I smiled. That fake smile I had perfected over the years. "I'm fine, Dorothy. Just a little busy. Busy being your son's maid." Her words were like a punch. "Forgive me for being direct, but I see you. I see you every day washing his clothes, cleaning his car, carrying grocery bags while he sits inside playing with his phone. That's not normal, Martha." I felt tears burning in my eyes, but I held them back. "He's my son, Dorothy. A mother does what she has to do." "A mother, yes. A slave, no." Dorothy took my hand. "You raised that boy. You gave him everything. But he's not a boy anymore. He's an adult who should be taking care of you, not the other way around." I didn't know what to answer, because she was right, because every word she said was true. But admitting it meant admitting that I had failed, that I had raised a son who used me, who scorned me, who treated me worse than a stranger. "Someday," Dorothy said before leaving, "you're going to have to choose between being his mother or being yourself. And I hope when that day comes, you choose you." That conversation was 2 months ago, and since then, things only got worse. Jasmine started inviting her friends over to my house. They would arrive with their expensive bags and their fake laughter and sit in my living room as if it were theirs. They left dirty glasses on the table. They threw crumbs on the couch. They stained my cushions with their makeup. And I cleaned up after them like an invisible shadow. Once, one of her friends called me over. She called me thinking I was the housekeeper. "Excuse me," she said, snapping her fingers. "Could you bring us more coffee? And make sure it's hot this time." I stood there, with the empty tray in my hands, looking at her, waiting for Jasmine to defend me, to say, "She's not the maid. She's my mother-in-law." But Jasmine only laughed, that soft, fake laugh. "Oh, Martha is always happy to help. Right, Martha?" And I nodded, as always, like the fool I was. Robert was worse. Every day he found new ways to humiliate me. If the food wasn't exactly how he wanted it, he would throw it in the trash in front of me. "This is horrible, Mum. How do you expect Jasmine to eat this garbage?" If his clothes weren't perfectly ironed, he'd throw them on the floor. "Do it again. And this time, do it right." He never yelled at me when Jasmine was around. Oh no. In front of her, he was the perfect son. Affectionate. Attentive. "Thanks for dinner, Mum. It's delicious." But as soon as she left for work, his mask fell, and I saw the monster I had created. I stopped celebrating my birthday 3 years ago. The last one I celebrated, Robert didn't even remember. He spent the whole day in his room playing video games. When he finally came out at 9 o'clock at night and saw me with a small cake I had bought myself, he said, "It's your birthday? Oh, well. Happy birthday, I guess. Is there anything for dinner?" That year I cried myself to sleep, and I promised not to expect anything from him again. No more expectations, no more disappointments. But today was different. Today I had turned 61 years old. And today, for the first time in 3 years, I had woken up with a small hope. Maybe, just maybe, Robert would remember. Maybe he would give me a hug. Maybe he would say, "Happy birthday, Mum, I love you." And instead, he woke me up with a bucket of cold water on my birthday, demanding that I cook to impress his wife, as if I were nothing, as if I were worthless. As I walked into the kitchen that morning with my hair still dripping ice-cold water, with my old dress stuck to my body, with my bare feet leaving wet prints on the floor, something inside me clicked. Something broke. Or maybe something woke up. I don't know. But I felt that this would be the last day I would allow this. The last day he would treat me like trash in my own house. Although I still didn't know how. I still didn't know what I would do. But something had changed, and there was no turning back. Robert was in the kitchen, leaning against the refrigerator, looking at his phone. He didn't even look up when I came in. He just pointed to the stove with a vague gesture of his hand. "I need 12 perfect pancakes," he said without looking at me. "With that fluffy texture you make. And don't burn them this time. Jasmine is very particular about breakfast. She says she can tell a person's quality by how they cook their pancakes." I just stood there, dripping water onto the floor of my own kitchen. My kitchen. The kitchen where I had prepared thousands of meals. Where I had cooked for him when he was a child. Where I had made him his favorite foods when he was sick. Where I had spent hours and hours of my life feeding him, nurturing him, loving him. And now he was demanding perfect pancakes to impress his wife. On my birthday, after waking me up with ice-cold water. "Robert," my voice came out firmer than I expected. "Today is my birthday." He finally looked up from his phone. He looked at me. His eyes scanned my soaked body, my dripping hair, my dress stuck to my skin. And I saw nothing. No emotion, no remorse. Nothing. "You already said that," he replied with a sigh of annoyance. "And I already told you that your birthday can wait." "Jasmine is coming in." He looked at his watch. 52 minutes, so move it." Something in his tone, something in the way he looked at me as if I were a nuisance, as if my existence was an inconvenience in his perfect day. Something in all of it made the rage that had been growing inside me for years begin to boil. But I didn't say anything, not yet. Because I had learned something in these 3 years of humiliation. I had learned that words meant nothing to Robert. Only actions mattered. And my actions had always been of submission, of obedience, of sacrifice. Maybe it was time to change that. I walked to the cupboard and took out the flour, eggs, and milk. My hands were still shaking, but not from the cold. From something else. Something I couldn't name yet. I started mixing the ingredients in silence while Robert continued with his phone, texting Jasmine. I could see his screen reflected in the oven glass. Hearts, kiss emojis. "I love you, my queen. Everything will be perfect for you." My queen. While his mother was standing there, soaked and trembling, preparing his breakfast on her birthday. "Did you put vanilla in the mixture?" he asked suddenly. "Jasmine likes it with vanilla. And make sure there are no lumps." There were lumps last time. I didn't answer. I just kept mixing, beating the eggs with more force than necessary. The mixture splattered a little on the countertop. I didn't bother to clean it up. Are you listening to me, Mum? His voice rose. I'm talking to you. I hear you, Robert. My voice sounded strange, flat, unemotional, as if it came from very far away. He frowned, but returned to his phone. I continued cooking. I turned on the stove. I heated the pan. I poured the first portion of batter and watched as it spread, as the bubbles formed on the surface. Exactly as I had done thousands of times before. The pancake cooked perfectly, golden, fluffy, exactly how he liked them. I put it on a plate and started on the next one. Is the coffee ready yet? Robert asked. No. Why not? I said I needed coffee. Because I'm making the pancakes you asked for. You can do both at the same time. God, Mum, it's not that difficult. I took a deep breath. I let the second pancake cook. I didn't make the coffee. Mum, the coffee. In a moment. Not in a moment. Now. Jasmine can't wait for her coffee. She has a tight schedule. A tight schedule. On her day off. To come have breakfast at my house. How generous. I finished the second pancake, then the third, the fourth. Robert kept complaining about the coffee, but I ignored him. Something in me had changed since I entered that kitchen. Something had hardened, as if a door had closed inside my chest and could no longer be opened. When I got to the eighth pancake, Robert exploded. Mum, damn it! What part of make the coffee now don't you understand? Are you deaf? Are you stupid? Stupid. He called me stupid. The spatula in my hand tightened. The metal was hot from the steam of the stove. I felt it burning my palm, but I didn't let go. The pain was almost comforting. Real. Tangible. Unlike everything else in my life, which felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I'll make you the coffee, I said finally, my voice still flat. When I finish the pancakes. Don't talk to me like that. I'm your son. You owe me respect. Respect. That word. Coming from the man who had woken me up with cold water. Who had called me stupid. Who lived in my house for free. Who treated me like garbage. I finished the 12 pancakes in silence. I stacked them on a plate like a perfect tower. Golden. Fluffy. Not a single flaw. Exactly as he wanted them. Then I prepared the coffee. Expensive coffee that I had bought with my pension. Coffee that I never drank because it was too expensive for me. The eggs, Robert said, looking at his watch. 35 minutes left. I need the scrambled eggs with cheese and mushrooms, and the orange juice. And set the table. Use the good tablecloth. The good tablecloth. The white tablecloth with embroidered yellow flowers my mother had given me. The last gift I received from her before she died. The tablecloth I kept for special occasions, for important days. The good tablecloth. I repeated, for a normal breakfast. It's not a normal breakfast, Mum. It's important. Jasmine is important. And I need everything to be perfect. Jasmine is important. Those 3 words hung in the air between us. Jasmine is important. Not you are important, Mum. Not, thank you for doing all this, Mum. Not happy birthday, Mum. Sorry I woke you up with cold water. Jasmine is important. And I wasn't. That was the message. That was the message I had been receiving for 3 years, but today, finally, I heard it clearly. I took the tablecloth out of the drawer. I spread it over the dining room table carefully. My hands were still shaking, but now it wasn't from cold or rage. It was from something else. Something that felt like waking up after a very long dream, or maybe like slowly dying inside. I made the eggs, mushrooms cut into thin slices, grated cheese melting in the pan. The smell filled the kitchen, a delicious smell that normally would have made me feel proud. But today I felt nothing, just emptiness. I squeezed the oranges, 6 oranges for 1 glass of fresh juice. My hands ached from the effort, but I continued. I put everything on the table. The pancakes, the eggs, the coffee, the juice. Cloth napkins I had ironed yesterday. Shiny cutlery I had polished the day before. Everything perfect. Everything beautiful. Like an altar for the goddess Jasmine. Robert inspected the table with a critical eye. He moved the plate of pancakes 2 inches to the left. He adjusted the position of the coffee cup. He folded the napkin a different way. "Flowers are missing," he said finally. "Go to the garden and cut some flowers. Put them in that vase. The glass one, flowers." He wanted flowers. The last flowers left in my small garden. The flowers I cared for. The only beautiful things I had left. "Robert, those flowers." "Now, Mum. Jasmine will be here in 20 minutes. I went out to the garden barefoot. The grass was wet with the morning dew. My feet sank into the cold earth. I looked at my flowers. Roses, daisies, lilies. I had planted them 2 years ago, when I still had hope, when I still thought that maybe things would get better. I cut the best ones, the prettiest ones. I felt every cut as if I were cutting pieces of myself. I brought them inside. I put them in the glass vase. I placed them in the center of the table. Perfect. Everything was perfect. For her. Never for me. Robert looked at the table one last time. He nodded with satisfaction, and then went to his room to change. I stayed standing there, looking at all that perfect food, all that effort, all that work, to impress a woman who barely looked at me, to satisfy a son who treated me like trash. I looked at myself in the reflection of the kitchen window. I still had wet hair, the wrinkled grey dress, no makeup, no shoes. I looked like a homeless person in my own house, while my son was getting ready in my room to receive his wife in my dining room with my food. Something inside me kept growing, that feeling that had started with the bucket of cold water. That silent rage that boiled so slowly I almost didn't feel it. But it was there, growing, expanding, filling every empty space inside my chest. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Robert came out of the room. He had completely changed. New pants that I had bought him last week with my pension, ironed shirt that I had ironed yesterday, shiny shoes that I had cleaned the day before yesterday. He looked good, handsome, presentable, like a successful man who had his life together. The perfect lie. He looked at himself in the hallway mirror. He fixed his hair. He sprayed on that expensive cologne that Jasmine had given him. Then he turned to me. "Mum, go change. You can't look like that when Jasmine arrives." I blinked. "Excuse me." "You're a mess. Wet hair. That awful dress. You look like a—" He stopped. "Just go change. Put on something presentable. This is the only clean dress I have. And whose fault is that? You should do laundry more often." "You should do laundry more often." As if I didn't spend half my life washing his clothes. As if the washing machine wasn't running day and night with his shirts, his pants, Jasmine's blouses, their sheets, their towels. As if my own clothes weren't always the last on the list. What was left over? What was never a priority? "Then I'll stay like this," I said. His face turned red. "No, you can't. Jasmine is going to think we're poor or something." "We are poor, Robert. Or at least I am. Because all my money goes to supporting you two." The words came out before I could stop them. And as soon as I said them, I saw his expression change, from surprise to fury in 1 second. "How dare you?" he hissed, approaching me. "After everything we've done for you. We give you company. We make you feel useful. And this is how you thank us? By complaining." Company. They were giving me company, as if I were a lonely old woman who should be grateful that they were using me as their personal maid. Robert, Not another word, he interrupted me. Go to your room, comb your hair, wash your face, and don't come out until you look presentable. I'm not going to allow you to ruin this breakfast with your attitude. My attitude. My attitude was the problem, not the fact that he had woken me up with ice-cold water, not the fact that he had called me stupid, not the fact that he had forgotten my birthday. Again, my attitude. But I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy. Not anymore. I walked to my small room, the one that had been my sewing room. I closed the door behind me. I sat on the bed. The sheets were still wet from the water. Everything smelled of dampness and defeat. I looked at myself in the small mirror over my dresser. 61 years old. When I had imagined this age, I thought I would be traveling, maybe with friends, visiting those places I always wanted to see, enjoying my retirement, living, truly living. Instead, I was here, in a room the size of a closet in my own house, hiding like a criminal, waiting for my son to give me permission to come out, to exist in my own space. I took off the wet dress. I searched my closet. Old clothes, worn clothes, clothes I had owned for years because I never had money to buy anything new. I finally found a dark green sweater that didn't have stains and a pair of black pants. I put them on. I combed my wet hair as best as I could. I put a little cream on my face. I didn't have makeup. I had stopped using it 2 years ago when I ran out and couldn't buy more. I looked at myself again in the mirror. Presentable. That was all I could achieve. Presentable to receive the woman who had taken my house, my son, my life. Then I heard the doorbell. The sound echoed throughout the house. My heart started beating faster. I didn't know why. It was just Jasmine. I had seen her hundreds of times. But something about this moment felt different, as if something important was about to happen, as if the universe was holding its breath. I heard Robert running toward the door, his voice cheerful, fake. My love, I'm so glad you got here. But then I heard another voice, Jasmine's voice. And it didn't sound happy. It didn't sound excited about the perfect breakfast that awaited her. It sounded furious. What are you doing here? She yelled. Her voice was so loud I could hear it clearly from my room. And why are you in your underwear? Silence. A silence so heavy I could feel it pressing against the walls of the house. Jasmine, I can explain. Robert's voice sounded small, scared. Explain what? That you lied to me? That you said you lived alone in an apartment? That all this crap about being a regional manager was a lie? My heart stopped. Regional manager? What was she talking about? I got up from the bed. I walked to the door. I opened it a crack. I could see the hallway. I could see the entrance. And what I saw took my breath away. Jasmine was at the door with a suitcase in her hand, dressed in an elegant suit, high heels, perfect makeup. But her face was red with fury, and Robert was standing there, in his underwear, only in his underwear, because he had gone to change and had obviously taken off his pants to put on others when he heard the doorbell and ran without thinking. Jasmine, wait, let me explain. Robert tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. Don't touch me. I came here because I needed to pick up the last things from your office, because we're getting divorced. Remember? The divorce I filed for 3 months ago. The divorce that finally became official last week. The world stopped spinning. Divorcing. 3 months ago. Last week. And he never told me anything. But I thought we could talk, Robert said, his voice breaking. I thought if I invited you for breakfast, if we talked, invite me for breakfast, to your mother's house where you live like a parasite. Robert, I filed for divorce because you're a liar, because you said you had an important job when you've actually been unemployed for 3 years, because you spent all my savings on junk, because you're a 35-year-old boy who lives with his mum and treats her like trash. Every word was like a knife, not for me, for him. And I was there, hidden behind my door, listening to his world of lies crumble. I didn't. She's not. Things aren't how you think, Robert stammered. No? Then tell me, Robert, where is that apartment you supposedly rented? Where is that regional manager job? Where are those business trips you said you took? Jasmine laughed, a bitter laugh. Let me guess. You've been living here all this time, lying, using your mother, using my money, being the failure I always knew you were, but didn't want to see. Jasmine, please. No, it's over. I only came because the lawyer said I needed to pick up your work documents. But now I see there are no documents, there is no job, there is nothing, just a pathetic man in his underwear in his mother's house. The front door was still open, and then I saw something else. Dorothy. My neighbor Dorothy was in her garden, watering her plants. But she had stopped watering. She was watching. And behind her, other neighbors were starting to peek out of their windows, out of their doors, drawn by the screaming. Robert noticed it too. He looked around. He saw the faces. He saw the stares. His face turned white. Close the door, he hissed at Jasmine. People are watching. So what? Are you ashamed that they know the truth? Good. Let everyone know. Jasmine raised her voice even more. This man is a liar, a fraud, a parasite who lives off his mother while telling the world he's successful. Jasmine's words echoed down the street. I could see more neighbors coming out. The woman who lived 3 houses down. The young man who always washed his car on Sundays. The elderly couple from the corner. Everyone watching. Everyone listening. And Robert, standing there, in his underwear, exposed in front of everyone. But I couldn't move. I was still behind my door, processing what I had just heard. Divorced. 3 months ago. It became official last week. And he never told me anything. Never. He made me cook for her. He made me clean for her. He made me prepare this house, this perfect breakfast. For what? To win her back? To pretend everything was fine? He had used me, again. As always. But this time, it had been worse because it had all been a lie. Everything. She wasn't coming for breakfast as his wife. She was coming to pick up documents. She was coming because the lawyer had asked her to. And he had put on this whole show. He had woken me up with cold water. He had humiliated me. He had yelled at me. All for a lie. I need you to return the apartment key, Jasmine was saying now, her voice calmer, but no less harsh. The one we rented together. Well, the one I rented and you said you'd pay half, but never did. Jasmine, please, give me another chance. Another chance? I gave you 100 chances. Robert, when I found out you spent my savings on that super expensive computer you never used, when you lied about looking for work, when you borrowed money from me and never returned it, when your mother called me crying because she didn't have money to buy food, because you had spent her pension on video games. That hit me like a punch. I had called her, a year ago, in a moment of desperation when the bank account was empty and there were still 2 weeks until my next pension check. I had called Jasmine, feeling humiliated, asking to borrow money. $50. Just $50 to buy food. And she had told me she couldn't. That she was very sorry, but she didn't have any extra money. I had believed she was selfish. that she was a cold woman who didn't care if her mother-in-law went hungry. But now I understood. Robert had left her without money too. He had used her just like me. I didn't know she called you, Robert lied. If I had known, liar. I told you. I confronted you. And do you know what you told me? That your mother was dramatic, that she exaggerated, that she was always inventing problems to get attention. Jasmine shook her head. You made me believe that she was the problem, when the problem was you. It was always you. Dramatic, exaggerated, invented problems to get attention. That's how Robert described me to his wife. That's how he painted me, like a crazy, needy, problematic old woman. And Jasmine had believed him. Of course she had believed him, because you always believe the person you love. The key, Jasmine insisted, holding out her hand. Give me the apartment key, and the credit card I gave you, and my car keys. The car. Jasmine, I need the car to look for work. It's not your car. It was never your car. It's in my name. I paid for it. Everything I paid for. While you lived here, in your mother's house, pretending to the world that you were a successful man. She laughed again, that humorless laugh. My God, I was so stupid, so blind. Robert didn't answer. He just stood there, trembling slightly. I don't know if it was from the cold of being in his underwear or from the humiliation. Maybe both. The keys. Now. He slowly turned around, walked toward his room. My room. The room he had taken from me. I could hear the drawers opening, things moving. And then he returned with a keychain. He gave it to Jasmine without looking her in the eyes. She took it, put it in her purse. Then she looked around the house. Her gaze stopped at the dining room table, at the perfect breakfast I had prepared, the perfect pancakes, the perfect eggs, the perfect coffee, the flowers I had cut from my garden, my mother's tablecloth. All this was for me, she asked, pointing to the table. You thought a fancy breakfast would make me forget everything, that it would make me come back to you. Robert didn't answer. Pathetic, Jasmine murmured. She turned to leave, but then she stopped. She looked toward the hallway, toward where I was hiding behind my door, and for a second, our eyes met. I don't know how she saw me. Maybe the door was more open than I thought. Maybe she just felt my presence. Martha, she called me. Her voice no longer sounded furious. It sounded tired, sad. I know you're there. I can see you. My heart sped up. I considered staying hidden, pretending I wasn't there. But what for? Everything had already been exposed. All the lies, all the secrets. There was nothing left to hide. I opened the door completely. I walked into the hallway. I walked toward the entrance where Jasmine was still standing with her suitcase. Robert looked at me with panic in his eyes, as if he was begging me not to say anything, not to embarrass him further. But I didn't look at him. I looked at Jasmine. I'm sorry, she said, and she sounded sincere. I'm so sorry for everything you've been through with him. I'm sorry I didn't realize sooner. I'm sorry I believed his lies about you. The tears started pricking my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. When I married him, I thought he was a good man, Jasmine continued. I thought he just needed support, that if I loved him enough, he would change, he would get better. But he doesn't change, does he? He just gets worse. He uses you more. He consumes you more, until there's nothing left of you. I nodded, because she was right, because that was exactly what had happened. He had consumed me, little by little, day after day, until there was nothing left of the Martha I used to be, just a shadow, a maid, an invisible woman in her own life. That's why I left, Jasmine said, because I realized that if I stayed, he would destroy me. And you. She looked at me with something like compassion. You should leave too. You should kick him out. It's your house, your life. You don't have to keep being his slave. Jasmine, shut up, Robert growled. You don't know anything. She's my mother. She has an obligation to take care of me, to help me. Obligation. There was that word again, as if having brought him into the world condemned me to serve him forever, to sacrifice myself for him no matter how much he hurt me, no matter how much he destroyed me. She doesn't have any obligation, Jasmine said firmly. No more than the obligation you had to be a good son, to treat her with respect, to take care of her in her old age instead of using her. She turned to me again. Martha, please, don't make the same mistake I did. Don't waste any more years of your life with someone who doesn't value you. Because believe me, he is never going to change. He's just going to take and take until there is nothing left of you. And then she left. She walked toward the street where her car was parked. A nice car, new, bright red. The car Robert had pretended was his. The car she had arrived in to visit me so many times, letting me think my son was successful, that he was doing well, that he had achieved something in his life. All lies, all an act. And I had been the only one foolish enough to believe them. The neighbors were still watching. Dorothy signaled to me with her hand. A silent question. Are you okay? I didn't know how to answer. Was I okay? No, I wasn't. I hadn't been okay in 3 years. Maybe longer. Maybe I had never been okay, and I was only realizing it now. Robert slammed the door shut. The sound echoed throughout the house. He turned around and looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw something I had never seen before. Fear. Real, pure fear. Because his world had just collapsed. His wife was gone forever. The neighbors now knew the truth, and I, his mother, the only person he had left, was standing there looking at him with an expression he didn't recognize. Mum, he started, his voice trembling. Mum, I can explain everything. Jasmine is crazy. She's making things up. I was going to tell you about the divorce, but I didn't want to worry you. I wanted to protect you. Protect me. Another lie. Another manipulation. Mum, say something, please. But I didn't say anything. Because for the first time in 3 years, maybe in my whole life, I didn't have words. I only had clarity. A cold, sharp clarity, like the ice-cold water that had woken me up this morning. A clarity that showed me exactly what my life was, what I had allowed it to become, and what I needed to do about it. I walked toward the dining room table, toward that perfect breakfast I had prepared while trembling from cold with wet hair. The perfect pancakes stacked like a tower, the fluffy eggs with melted cheese, the aromatic coffee, the freshly squeezed orange juice, the flowers from my garden in the glass vase. My mother's tablecloth spread out with such care. Everything perfect, everything beautiful, everything useless. I took one of the pancakes with my hand. It was still warm. I held it for a moment, feeling its fluffy texture between my fingers. That pancake I had made with so much care. That pancake that was supposed to impress a woman who was no longer his wife. That pancake that represented everything I had been to him during these 3 years. A tool, a means to an end. Nothing more. And I threw it in the trash. Just like that. without ceremony, without drama. I just dropped it into the wastebasket next to the table. "What are you doing?" Robert's voice sounded sharp, almost hysterical. I didn't answer. I took another pancake. I threw it. Broken. And another. The 12 perfect pancakes ended up in the trash, then the eggs. I scraped them from the plate directly into the bin. The coffee. I poured it down the sink. The juice, too. Everything. Every single thing I had prepared with my tired hands and my broken heart. "Mom, what the hell are you doing? It took me effort to make you prepare all that." It took him effort, as if he had done anything more than yell orders from his phone. I took the flowers from the vase. My flowers. The last beautiful flowers from my garden. The ones I had cut this morning, feeling like I was cutting pieces of my soul. I held them for a moment, looking at them. They were still beautiful. They still smelled sweet. They didn't deserve to be on this table. They didn't deserve to be part of this lie. I walked toward my room. I heard Robert following me, still in his underwear, still yelling. But I no longer heard his words. They were just noise. Noise that I had endured for too long. I put the flowers in a glass of water next to my bed. There, where I could see them, where I could enjoy them, not to impress anyone, just for me. Then I opened my closet. I took out my small suitcase, the one I had used 5 years ago when I still traveled, when I still had a life of my own, before Robert came and turned my existence into this. "What are you doing with that suitcase?" Robert was at my bedroom door, his eyes wide open. "Are you going to leave? Are you going to abandon me? That's how selfish you are." Selfish. I was selfish. Not him who had woken me up with cold water. Not him who had used and lied to me for 3 years. Not him who had spent my pension on his whims while I went hungry. I was the selfish one for wanting to leave. But I wasn't leaving. Not yet. First, I had something to do. I closed the empty suitcase. I left it on the bed. And then I walked toward the door where Robert was standing. He looked at me with confusion, with fear. Good. Let him be afraid. It was time for him to feel even a fraction of what I had felt all these years. "Move," I told him. My voice sounded strange even to me. Calm, cold, unemotional. "What?" "Move away from the door. I need to pass." He moved, still confused. I walked toward the kitchen, toward the drawer where I kept all the keys. House keys, garage keys, keys to everything. I took them all, every single one. I held them in my hand, feeling their weight. "Mom, what are you doing?" His voice now sounded nervous, really nervous. I walked toward the living room. I grabbed my purse. That old purse I had had for 10 years. I put the keys inside. Then I took my coat from the rack. I put it on. I was still in my green sweater and black pants. I still had damp hair, but I didn't care. Not anymore. "Mom, answer me. Where are you going?" I headed toward the front door, the same door Jasmine had left through a few minutes ago. The same door the bucket of cold water had entered through this morning, when Robert decided my birthday didn't matter as much as his perfect pancakes. "You can't leave," Robert said, his voice rising in panic. "This is your house. You can't just leave and abandon me here." I stopped at the door. I turned around. I looked at him. Really looked at him. This 35-year-old man standing in his underwear in the middle of the living room. This man who had come out of my body. This man I had raised, fed, loved with every fiber of my being. This man who had slowly destroyed me, day after day, until there was almost nothing left of me. "You're right," I said finally. "This is my house." I saw hope light up in his eyes. He thought I was going to stay. He thought he had won again, as always. So I continued. "You can stay here, inside, while I go out, and when I come back, we are going to have a very long conversation about how things are going to change." "Change? What do you mean, change?" I didn't answer. I just opened the door. The fresh morning air hit my face. It smelled of freedom, of possibility, of life. "Mum, you can't do this. I need you here. Who is going to clean? Who is going to cook? Who is going to—" I closed the door, gently, without slamming it, without drama. I just closed it. And then, with hands that were barely trembling, I took the keys out of my purse and locked up, from the outside, leaving Robert inside. I heard the sound of the bolt, that small but definite click, the sound of a door closing, or maybe of a door opening. It depended on how you looked at it. Immediately I heard pounding from inside. "Mom, open this door. Mom, this isn't funny." But I was already walking down the porch steps, walking down the stone path toward the street. The sun was fully out now. It was a beautiful morning, clear sky, birds singing, the kind of morning that makes life worth living. Dorothy was in her garden, still with the hose in her hand, although she wasn't watering anymore. She watched me walk toward her. Her eyes went from me to my house, where Robert's pounding and yelling could be heard clearly. "Martha," she called me. "Are you okay? What's going on?" I stopped at the fence that separated our yards. I looked at her, this woman who had witnessed my humiliation for 3 years, who had seen how I became a shadow of myself, who had tried to warn me and I hadn't listened. "I'm fine, Dorothy," I said. And for the first time in years, it was true. Or at least, I was on my way to being true. "I'm just taking a break." She looked toward my house again. The pounding continued. The windows shook with the force of Robert's fists hitting the door. "Did you lock him in?" she asked. And in her voice there was something, not disapproval. It almost sounded like admiration. "Just for a while," I replied. "He needs to learn that this is my house, not his." A slow smile spread across Dorothy's face. "Do you know what day today is, Martha?" "My birthday." "Your birthday," she repeated. 61 years old. And finally, you are giving yourself a valuable gift. What is that? Respect, dignity, yourself." The tears finally came. I couldn't stop them anymore. But they weren't sad tears. Or maybe they were. But they were also something else. Liberation, relief, the end of something that had lasted too long. "Come," Dorothy said, opening her gate. "Come over to my place. I'll make you coffee. The good stuff. And a piece of that carrot cake I made yesterday. And we can sit on my porch and watch the show." "The show?" She pointed toward my house with her head. Robert had appeared in the window, still in his underwear, hitting the glass, shouting things I couldn't hear clearly, but were probably threats or pleas or both. And other neighbors were coming out. The woman from 3 houses down in her bathrobe, the young man with his coffee cup, the elderly couple holding hands. Everyone watching. Everyone seeing Robert make a fool of himself. Everyone witnessing his humiliation. And I, for the first time in 3 years, didn't feel shame. I didn't feel the need to defend him, to explain, to apologize for him. I only felt peace. A strange and new and slightly terrifying peace. But peace at last. Let's go, Dorothy insisted, taking my arm gently. Let him yell for a while. It will do him good. And you too. And I went with her. We walked up her porch steps. We went into her house, which smelled of cinnamon and cleanliness and normality. She sat me down on her comfortable couch. She brought me coffee in a pretty mug. She served me a huge slice of cake. And we sat together on her porch, drinking coffee, eating cake, and yes, watching the show. Dorothy's coffee was delicious, rich, strong, with a touch of cinnamon I never would have thought to add. The carrot cake melted in my mouth. Every bite tasted like something I had forgotten existed. Simple pleasure, guilt-free enjoyment. Food I didn't have to prepare myself for others. From Dorothy's porch, we could see my house perfectly. Robert was still in the window. He had stopped pounding, but his face was pressed against the glass, looking out, searching for me. When he saw me sitting on Dorothy's porch with my coffee and my cake, his expression changed from panic to fury. He started shouting something. I couldn't hear the exact words, but the message was clear. "Get back here! Open this door! How dare you!" "How long do you plan to leave him there?" Dorothy asked, taking a sip of her coffee. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've never done anything like this before." "Well, it's time you start." Dorothy looked at me with those wise eyes that only come with 70 years of life. "Do you know what the problem with being too good is, Martha? People mistake it for being weak. They think they can do whatever they want with you because you're always going to forgive. You're always going to give in. You're always going to put their needs before yours." "He's my son," I said, although the words sounded hollow even to me. "And you are his mother, not his slave. There is a difference." Dorothy put her mug down on the small table between us. "My son lived with me for a while too. After his divorce, I thought it would be temporary. 6 months, maybe. It turned into 2 years. And in those 2 years, I saw how he started treating me like his maid. Not as badly as Robert treats you, but enough. Enough so that one day I realized that if I didn't do something, I would spend the rest of my life serving an adult man who should be taking care of himself." "What did you do?" "I kicked him out," she said so simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "I gave him 30 days. I told him, 'You are my son and I love you, but this is my house and my life, and I need you to find yours.' He cried. He yelled at me. He told me I was a terrible mother. But he left. And do you know what happened next?" I shook my head. "He became a man. He found a job. He rented an apartment. He met someone new. He rebuilt his life. And now, 5 years later, he comes to visit me every Sunday. He brings me flowers. He takes me out to dinner. And he thanks me. He thanks me for forcing him to grow up, for loving him enough to let him fall and learn to stand up on his own." "Robert isn't like that," I said. "He will never thank me. He will never understand." "Maybe not. Maybe so. But that's not what's important, Martha. The important thing is not whether he changes. It's whether you change. If you take back your life, your dignity, your house, your peace." I took another bite of cake. I chewed slowly, letting Dorothy's words settle inside me. She was right. Of course she was right. But knowing she was right and acting on it were two different things. More neighbors had come out now. Some pretended to do things, watering plants that didn't need water, checking the mailbox for the 3rd time, washing cars that were already clean. But everyone was looking toward my house, toward Robert in the window. The rumors must already be running through the whole street. The scene with Jasmine, the screaming, Robert in his underwear. And now this, the mother who had finally said enough. My phone rang in my purse. I took it out. It was Robert. Of course. I let it ring. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Then it started ringing again. I turned it off. Well done, Dorothy said. It's going to get worse when you go back. Probably. But you're no longer the same woman who left that house half an hour ago. Something changed, right? I can see it in your eyes. She was right. Something had changed. That bucket of cold water this morning, Robert's lies, Jasmine's words. Everything had converged in this moment. This moment sitting on my neighbour's porch, drinking coffee, watching my adult son throw a tantrum in my house. And instead of feeling guilt or shame, I felt clarity. A cold and perfect clarity that cut through years of confusion and manipulation. You know what the worst part is, I said finally. It's not that he treated me badly. It's not that he used me. It's that I allowed it. For 3 years allowed it. And if I'm honest with myself, I allowed it his whole life. Every time he did something wrong and I excused him. Every time he hurt someone and I defended him. Every time he failed and I rescued him. I created this monster, Dorothy. I did. No, Dorothy said firmly. You raised him. There's a difference. You did what you thought was right. What all mothers do. Protect, love, support. But he chose who to be. He chose how to treat you. He chose to be a parasite instead of a son. Those were his decisions, not yours. But I allowed it to continue. Until today. Dorothy smiled. Today you said enough. Today you chose differently. And that, my dear friend, is the only thing that matters. Not the past, not the mistakes. Only this moment, this decision, this new beginning. A new beginning. At 61 years old, on my birthday. What a strange and terrifying and wonderful gift. We sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee, watching the morning unfold. The sun climbed higher in the sky. The day warmed up. Life continued. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was part of that life. Not just a shadow moving on the edges, but a real person, with value, with rights, with a future. Robert had disappeared from the window. He was probably inside, plotting, planning what to say when I returned, what words to use to manipulate me back into my role as a maid. But something told me that this time would be different. This time I would be different. What are you going to do when you go back? Dorothy asked, as if she could read my thoughts. I don't know exactly, but I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to cook for him. I'm not going to clean up his mess. I'm not going to keep being his unpaid housekeeper. And if he gets angry, if he yells at you, if he threatens to leave, then let him leave. The words came out easier than I expected. He's an adult man. He's 35 years old. It's time for him to learn to live alone, or with his father, or on the street if necessary, but not in my house anymore. Not this way. Not treating me like trash. Dorothy reached out her hand and took mine. Her fingers were warm, soft, comforting. I'm proud of you. I know it doesn't mean much coming from a nosy neighbor, but I am. This takes more courage than most people have. I don't feel brave. I feel terrified. Courage is not the absence of fear, dear. It's doing the right thing despite the fear. We finished our coffee. We ate more cake. Dorothy told me stories from her own life, about her difficult marriage that ended in divorce after 30 years, about how she had to rebuild herself at 50, about how she thought her life was over, but it was actually just beginning, about how the best years of her life had been these last 20, living alone, on her own terms, without having to serve anyone but herself. Loneliness and being alone are two different things, she told me. You can be surrounded by people and feel deeply lonely, or you can be alone and feel completely at peace. I chose peace. I looked at my watch. 2 hours had passed since I locked the door to my house. 2 hours since I left Robert locked inside. 2 hours in which I had not cooked, cleaned, served, or obeyed anyone. 2 hours of freedom. I should go back, I said finally. Are you ready? No, but I don't think I'll ever feel ready, so I better do it now. Dorothy nodded. She walked me to her gate. If you need me, I'll be here. If things get ugly, if he gets violent, you scream and I'll call the police. Understood? Understood. And Martha, happy birthday. This is the first day of the rest of your life. Make it count. I walked back to my house slowly. Every step felt significant, as if I were walking toward my destiny instead of away from it. The keys weighed in my purse. The power to open or keep closed. The power to decide who entered my space and on what terms. When I reached my door, I stopped. I took a deep breath. And then, with hands that no longer trembled, I took out the keys and opened the door. Robert was there. He had found pants, finally. He was sitting on the couch with his arms crossed, looking at me with a mixture of fury and relief. His phone was on the table in front of him. He had probably tried to call me 50 times. "Where the hell were you?" he exploded as soon as he saw me. "How could you lock me in like that? Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? The neighbors saw me. Everyone saw me." I closed the door behind me. I put the keys back in my purse. And I looked at him, really looked at him, without fear, without guilt, without that desperate need to appease him that had defined our relationship for years. "Good," I said simply. "Let them see you. Maybe that way you'll learn something." His mouth dropped open in shock. He clearly didn't expect that answer. "We need to talk, Robert. And this time you're going to listen." I sat down on the armchair across from him. Not in the kitchen where I normally stood while he sat. Not standing up, ready to jump to fulfill his orders. Sitting, like an equal, like the owner of this house. Because that was what I was. The owner, not him. "We have nothing to talk about," Robert said, his voice still harsh, but with a touch of uncertainty. "You owe me an apology. You locked me in my own house as if I were a prisoner." "It's not your house," I said calmly. "It's my house. I bought it with my money. I pay the mortgage. I pay the utilities. I pay for everything. This was never your house, Robert. It was just a place where I allowed you to stay temporarily. And that time is over." The color drained from his face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're leaving. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. And during those 30 days, things are going to be very different here. You can't kick me out. I'm your son." "Exactly. You're my son. Not my owner. Not my boss. Not the man of this house. My son. A son who owes me respect and hasn't shown it in 3 years." He stood up, pacing back and forth. "This is because of what Jasmine said, isn't it? She filled your head with lies. She always hated me. She always tried to turn you against me. Jasmine told me the truth you never had the courage to tell me, that you're divorced, that you've been living here making up lies about your life, that you used me to maintain your farce. I was going to tell you." "When? After another 3 months? Another 6? Never." My voice rose for the first time. "You woke me up with cold water, Robert. On my birthday. You yelled at me. You insulted me. You made me prepare an elaborate breakfast for a woman who is no longer your wife. And all for what? To feed your fantasies? To make me an accomplice to your lies? I was trying to fix things with her. I needed your help. No, you needed a free maid, as always. I stood up as well, confronting him. Do you know what Jasmine told me? That I called her asking to borrow money a year ago. $50 to buy food because you had spent all my pension. And you told her I was dramatic, that I exaggerated, that I invented problems. You painted me as a crazy liar in front of your wife. I didn't. That's not what happened. Yes, it is. That's exactly what happened. And the worst part is that I believed you when you said you needed that money to look for work. I believed you when you said it was temporary. I believed you every time you promised to change. But I don't believe you anymore, Robert. Not anymore. His eyes filled with tears, those manipulative tears he always used when he wanted me to give in. Mum, please. I made mistakes, I know, but I'm your son. You can't abandon me. I'm not abandoning you. I'm freeing you, and I'm freeing myself. I walked toward him. I looked him in the eyes. For 3 years I have served you. I have given you everything. My money, my time, my energy, my dignity. And it hasn't been enough. It's never enough. Because you don't want a mother, Robert. You want a slave. That's not true. No? When was the last time you said thank you? When was the last time you washed your own clothes? That you cooked your own food? That you cleaned up your own mess? I waited. He didn't answer. Exactly. Never. Because in your mind, that's my obligation. Because I'm your mother, I must serve you forever. Mothers take care of their children. It's natural. Sons also take care of their mothers, especially when mothers get older. But you have never taken care of me, not for a single day. You have only taken, and taken, and taken, until there is nothing left of me. He dropped onto the couch again, his head in his hands. What am I supposed to do? I don't have a job. I don't have money. I have nowhere to go. Then find them. You have 30 days. That's more than most people would have. Use that time wisely, and if you don't find anything in 30 days, then you'll have to figure something out. Because in 30 days, I'm changing the locks, and if you're still here, I'm calling the police. He raised his head sharply, his eyes full of disbelief. You wouldn't do that. You're not like that. I wasn't like that. But the woman I was died this morning, when you threw that bucket of cold water on me, when you forgot my birthday again, when you called me stupid. That woman who put up with everything, who forgave everything, who sacrificed herself for you no matter the cost, that woman no longer exists. And in her place there is someone new, someone who finally understood that loving you doesn't mean destroying myself. Silence. A silence so heavy I could feel it pressing against my chest. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was a liberating silence. During these 30 days, I continued, you are going to live here under my rules. You will wash your own clothes. You will cook your own food. You will clean up your own mess. You will pay $300 a month for the room. And you will look for work. Every day. If I can't see that you are making a real effort, the 30 days become 15. Understood? I don't have $300. Then sell something. That expensive computer you bought with my money. Those video games. Find a way. Because I am no longer going to subsidize your life. He stared at me as if I were a stranger. And maybe I was. Maybe the mother he knew really had died this morning. I got up and walked toward my room. I closed the door behind me. I sat on the bed. The flowers I had put in the glass were still there, beautiful and fragrant. I looked at the flowers. They were just flowers, but they represented something bigger. They represented beauty that I had allowed myself to have for myself. A small act of self-love. 61 years old. It wasn't too late. I still had time. Time to travel, to make friends, to exist without having to justify every moment. I got up. I washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror, and I saw something new in my eyes. Light. Hope. Life. I walked out of my room. I grabbed my purse, my keys, my coat. "Where are you going?" Robert asked. "To celebrate my birthday." "Alone?" "Yes, alone. And happy." And I left. I walked down my street under the midday sun. Dorothy waved to me from her garden. I smiled and waved back. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe to the park. Maybe to that nice coffee shop downtown. Maybe I would just walk aimlessly, enjoying the sun and the fresh air and the freedom. Because today was my birthday, 61 years old, and after so many years of living for others, I was finally going to live for myself. Sometimes a bucket of cold water is what it takes to wake up, to see the truth, to find the courage to change, because it showed me who I really was. Not a victim, not a shadow, but Martha, a woman who finally understood that respect is not asked for, it is demanded, and that loving someone should never mean losing yourself. And with that thought, with the sun on my face and a smile on my lips, I walked toward my new beginning, toward the rest of my life, a life that finally belonged only to me.